What's going on, everybody? Welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. I'm overjoyed to be once again joined by the one and only Justis Mosqueda. You can find him on X at JUMOSQ, of course, over at acmepackingcompany.com. Justis, you messaged me. You're like, we've got to talk about some new kickoff rules and kick return rules. I'm like, yes, that sounds amazing. We'll talk about a bunch of other stuff as well. But most importantly, how the heck are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing phenomenal. We were kind of talking about offline, just getting into summer a little bit. Weather's warming up here in Green Bay, finally getting some of that summer-ish weather, which has been a lot of fun. But yeah, we're also in the middle of, or I guess sort of ending OTAs, mini camps next week. And then we get a little bit of that lull period before training camp kicks off, but it'll be here before you know it. So that's kind of where I wanted to start, just in general. Like, obviously, I'm sort of in the weeds as I'm kind of going through these OTA practices, trying to see as much as I possibly can. I know you are obviously trying to gather all of the Domovsky tweets and my tweets and everything else that's going on in the world. So your view is extremely interesting to me because it's obviously just a little bit different. So I kind of want to know, as you've been kind of, gaining all this information, what's stood out to you? What is most interesting to you? What is most amazing to you? I'll let you go in any freaking direction you want.
Nothing too crazy, honestly, because, we've done this long enough that we know Matt's just not going to give rookies starting jobs. So, I'm not panicking that Bullard and Edgerrin Cooper aren't getting, the quote-unquote starts with the ones in practices where they don't even have full pads on and, they're voluntary and all that stuff. I guess the early thing that surprised me the most is Andre Dillard getting looks at both tackle positions and stuff. And I guess to kind of expand on that, the offensive line in general, like Elton Jenkins getting a couple looks at center. I think those are probably the biggest surprises to me and the biggest takeaways where I mean, you tell me. I can't make heads or tails of the center position. I don't know if they're going to push Josh Myers or not. They said, he's one of the few guys who isn't going to get cross-trained. I think it was Butkus who was like, he's our center. Then, Elton Jenkins is getting a couple snaps, which kind of makes sense, right? Like, they don't have another true center on the team outside of I'm spacing on his name, the kid from Duke that they just drafted.
Yep.
He's probably going to be a center at the NFL level just because of his size and stuff like that. So maybe they're getting ready for like a, break glass in case of emergency type of thing. But I know a lot of people want Josh Myers to get pushed. Not necessarily lose his job, but like at least, hey, let's see it. Prove it. You're in a contract year, right? Like all that stuff. So I think that's interesting. I think Slayton was a guy who I thought, because of the performance escalators, which like is a whole other thing if you want to go down that rabbit hole. He's getting paid I think it's like $3 million this year, which is significantly more than he had in the past. Don't think he's a great scheme fit for what they want to do. I know everyone points to the RAS numbers and stuff like that. He's not a penetrator. It's just not what he does. Like you could look at his TFL numbers, like the amount of snaps that he's played. Compared to the amount of TFLs that he makes. Like it's a night and day compared to even not even just Kenny Clark, but Carl Brooks and stuff like that. So I think it's interesting that he's been getting clear burn and is ahead of Brooks on the depth chart as of now. And again, talking about this early June, a lot of things can change, right? But those are kind of what stood out to me.
So I want to talk about both those things for a second. I think both are interesting. Let's start with Slayton, and then we'll kind of transition into the offensive line a little bit. You'll know this maybe a little bit better than probably even I would. I'm sure you've studied these Jeff Hafley versions of defenses in pretty significant detail. I would assume, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, that even in those versions of the defense, there has to be at some point a guy that has a little bit more bulk and heft to them, that in some of the goal line situations, the short yardage situations, and those sort of things, like there's got to be still value there in some capacity, even if it's not like a great scheme fit for what they're trying to do on a down in, down out sort of situation. Like to me, he's the only, and I know Kenny's a freak at his size for what he's able to do holding up at the point of attack. And that's just a superpower. But I would be immediately concerned. Like, let's say Slayton like wasn't on the team or something of like, if Kenny goes down, like now you're in just like no man's land for guys trying to hold up at the point of attack, meaning like you've got like Jonathan Ford, and that might be kind of it after that. So, you know, I would think that just his ability to, you know, plug things up a little bit would be something that would be beneficial to this team, just as an added flavor of something they don't have a ton of. Or are you just saying more that you're surprised that he's in over Wyatt and Brooks on kind of that first team sort of line?
Kind of both. It wasn't so much Slayton being a cat casualty or something like that. I think that is much more up the Royce Newman alley, if we're talking about. So again, this conversation doesn't happen without the performance escalator.
Agreed.
Right. This is another thing, right? Where it's like the minimum that these guys would have made, like their salary, would have been like $700,000, right? And now you're talking about $3 million, and it's unguaranteed. And I think I'm not stepping out of line when I say the CBA was rushed, and I understand that there were good reasons for that, right? Like the world was panicking about COVID, and the contract was coming up, and they just wanted to get something on paper and made sure, like, hey, a lot of these guys are only going to get one big contract, right? So to make sure that they would do that, I think a lot of things got overlooked, and I think one of the things is the performance escalators, because I now think those guys qualify, like a Royce Newman, right, who's should be considered as a guy on the roster bubble, is now fighting for his life, and his salary is going to cost 4 times more than a rookie.
Yeah.
And none of it's guaranteed. Like, how does that help the players at all, right? So I thought maybe a potential trade of Slayton would be on the table. But to your point, I mean, the nose tackle position is not super deep in Green Bay. I thought that was going to be a position that they were going to address more in the draft, you know, them bringing in guys like Christian Boyd and stuff like that. I thought kind of signaled that, but, you know, he wasn't around for the picks that they liked him at. So, yeah, it's an interesting situation. I think at this point, it would be hard to surpass Slayton if this is what they already think about him, right? Yeah. Like, I don't think there's going to be a bunch of new information that we're going to find about the defensive line on, you know, during the preseason or, you know, joint practices or anything. So I'm just going to assume he makes the roster, which is kind of interesting because, you know, they've talked about how they're going to need to add linebacker bodies onto the 53-man roster compared to what they've had before. And the way Bisaccia runs that defense or that special teams unit, he's going to want to keep safeties. So we're now talking about, you know, King potentially having to fight Ballantyne at the end of the cornerback position, right? We're talking about all these safeties that you just drafted, who you're going to have to figure out how to keep them on the roster some way, form, or fashion, right? Like, there could be a pinch at defensive tackle, and, like, you might only keep 4. So, like, I think there's a real conversation about, like, Slayton or Wooden, right, at this point, and which one you keep on the roster. And that's why I kind of thought, you know, maybe a trade was potentially on the table. But if he's getting looks with the ones at this point, like, I think they're just probably going to try to roll with him this season. So
that's not even to mention the potential if you would, for some reason, want to keep a 7th wide receiver, if you want to keep Tyler Davis as a 4th tight end.
6th.
But like, if they like love those guys, if all of a sudden they love a Grant Dubose or like something like that, like if they did love an extra receiver, like they've got 6 already, and I don't think Malik Heath is necessarily a lock, but like if they love the 6 and then all of a sudden they like one more, a Tyler Davis, or if they want him to be a core special teamer like he was 2 years ago, that's a number 4 tight end.
Big time. Yeah, that's a guy people overlook all the time, and it's like you don't understand how many snaps he's taken up. Yeah, like.
Number 2 and number 3 quarterback, if they want to keep Michael Pratt as a developmental number 3, like there's going to be some very interesting decisions. I think what happens is I think they keep 9 defensive linemen, 4 edge rushers, 4 defensive tackles, and Colby Wooden is your 5th edge rusher and your 5th defensive tackle is what I kind of think it kind of equates down to. And having also the ability to kick LVN inside. Now, but again, then if like all of a sudden you really like a Brenton Cox, like that changes the calculus there as well, who had 2 sacks in the OTA yesterday. So yeah, I think those are all going to be super, super interesting questions.
Deshaun Banks was the guy who actually played the snaps, as a practice squad call over Brenton Cox in the playoff game. So there's another conversation there. Yeah, I mean, I've said it before, and it's kind of like a meme at this point, right? But like the Batman Dark Knight movie, right, where the Joker breaks the pool stick. That's every room. It feels like in the Packers facility this summer. It's like some of you guys are going to be the reason why other people are cut, which is a good thing for the Packers, right? I mean, you want competition, you know, all that stuff. Like no one's just, taking a rest and assuming that they're going to get their roster spot. Like it's going to be pretty competitive across the board in Green Bay this year.
I think so. And I think not only within the rooms, right? Because I think within the rooms they're going to be fighting for the pecking order, but then like like we're talking about
roster spots,
it might be a Tyler Davis versus a Brenton Cox versus a Michael Pratt versus like it might be even with inside or outside of those rooms that those guys are having to fight each other, and it's going to be ultra competitive everywhere. Because I think trying to narrow it down to 53 is going to be a tough exercise with how deep this roster is, and how many of these guys have already made 53-man rosters at some capacity. I mean, Zane Anderson, Benny Sapp, the third, like both made 53s by for a significant period of last season. Christian Welch, Eric Wilson, guys at the back of the linebacker room have made a lot of, or at least Wilson's made a lot of 53-man rosters. Welch did last year. So like there's a lot of guys on this team that have already made 53s. They added a ton of draft picks that we know Goody does not like to cut. Like it's going to be massively competitive.
Plus, NFL supposedly turning the dial on special teams and making it more important, like only makes those conversations even more impactful, right? So
let's transition over to the offensive line. So I think Myers just wins the center job. Now I'm with you. Like if we're going to have competition last year for John Runyon Jr. for 50% of the snaps or whatever it was, and Yosh Nijman and Rasheed Walker are going to split time, like I would like somebody to ultimately push Josh Myers a little bit more.
That's such a tricky thing though, especially if he's handling the calls on the line and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're right. That's fair. I guess I would just like competition in general at that spot is probably a better way to put it, but you're 1,000,000% right. Let me ask you this. What is your ideal left to right? If you had to start a 5 tomorrow, what's your starting group right now?
Don't care which player plays which position at tackle, but I would like it to be Walker and Morgan. I think that makes the most sense to me. At left guard, I mean, just keep Elton there. Like that works for me. Play Zach Tom at center if you think that he has Hall of Fame potential there, like Demovsky reported.
Yeah.
And then let everyone else compete at right guard. I mean, that's totally fine with me. Like Myers played guard in college. Let him compete for a job at right guard if he's not going to win the center job. But it's so tough talking about this stuff too because Zach Tom is dealing with that bicep injury. So like he's not in camp or pec injury. Sorry.
He looks much ahead of Tucker Kraft at this point. At least Tom is doing some of the stuff with like the warming up and doing some rehab stuff, whereas Tucker Kraft's in sweats in a t-shirt with an arm still on the sling. He definitely looks further away. I'm much more hopeful that Tom will be ready to go come training camp, or at least around then, than maybe Tucker Kraft at this point. But we'll see. Hopefully they're just ready to go. I lean more. I've been talking about this a little bit. I kind of want Sheed at left tackle, Jordan Morgan at left guard to keep him on the left side, just because it's where he's played his entire college career has been on the left side.
Right.
Instead of rather putting him on a right side, whether it be at guard or tackle, just keep him on the left. If he needs to ever kick out to left tackle, it's just at least one spot away. I would go Elton at center, Zach Tom stay at right tackle, and then to your point, let everyone else fight for right guard in Sean Ryan, Josh Myers, Jacob Monk, whoever else you want to get involved in that conversation. Let them fight for right guard. But I kind of like the Elton at center. Or if they are dead set on Josh Myers, then just Myers at center, Elton at right guard, and then have Elton and Zach Tom next to each other on the right side of the line. And that gives me some excitement too about maybe what they could do even in the running game and, just kind of setting and forgetting the right side of the line a little bit.
Yeah. If Myers is the starting center, I think it shapes out pretty easily. And I think Sean Ryan is probably, the odd man out in that situation. The only conversation really to be had is like, is Morgan going to be a tackle guard? Right?
Yeah.
At that point, if it's Myers, what's going to happen with Morgan? And that's not a huge deal to me.
I want to go back to what you were talking about with Dillard for a second, because I think it is interesting. First of all, obviously you mentioned him going left to right, but also in those first practices with Zach Tom out, as you mentioned, I'm not super shocked that they didn't immediately put Jordan Morgan in there because, again, rookies got to earn their spots or whatever. But they've had Caleb
Dillard
Jones.
just got here too.
I know, right? And Caleb Jones, Luke Tenuta, they've had some guys that have certainly been here for some time that they could have put in that spot. And they went right with Andre Dillard. You and I both, of course, know the story. First round pick, super talented guy. I don't know how you felt about him coming out of the draft. I liked him. Yeah, I liked him a lot. I thought he would be potentially in play with Green Bay's, first pick when they picked Rashawn Gary. Obviously ends up going later. I think they passed on him twice, actually. I think he went a pick after Darnell Savage. But things did not work out in Philly. Jordan Mailata, who gets taken in the same draft, rugby player, 7th round guy, never played football before, pretty much almost immediately becomes the better tackle than him. Had an okay, I always forget if it was his 2nd or 3rd season kind of as a swing guy, but just never fit in, doesn't do well in Philly. Tennessee comes out of their mind when he becomes a free agent and gives him a huge free agent deal, like $13 million guaranteed to make him the starter, gets benched 3 separate times a season ago. And now his career is like on life support. He gets no guaranteed money whatsoever. But I thought, Matt was pretty complimentary of him. He gets that right tackle spot with Zach Tom being out.
He said he was a perfect scheme fit.
Yes, very much.
You're saying so.
We'll see. But yeah, it's an interesting discussion point. I am, like I said, I was excited about him coming out of college. I think he's like, 28, 29 now. And he's had a lot of opportunities in Philly. I know people are like, well, now he gets to be part of this Green Bay like Philly's got a pretty freaking good offensive line, group in developing those guys. And it didn't work there. Tennessee's pretty good at it too. They have not, he did not have success there. But listen, I think the one thing here with Dillard is like, he is on life. This is it. If he doesn't do well here on a bare minimum contract and doesn't make it out of camp, I don't know that there's anywhere else for him to go after this. So hopefully it's now or never. And hopefully it's just now for Dillard.
Yeah. Hopefully, he takes those steps, but he's like, what, 6 years into his NFL career. I'm just
not holding your breath.
I'm going to trust my eyes and just not assume things. I mean, again, it was interesting to me that he was getting looks with the first team. Was not expecting that, because even when you look at his contract, I mean, it's like basically like a minimum deal, right?
Oh yeah, Batman. Yeah,
no guarantees. Like he signed it right before the draft. So yeah, I'm not expecting too much. I don't know again if he even ends up making the roster. So
it'll definitely be a battle for all those guys. It's another one of those positions that's going to be very interesting to see how they cut it down. Just to go back to your point though, I like from before of like what they're doing right now and moving guys around. I think this is just ultimate cross-training period, trying to get these guys as many different reps just to kind of get a little bit familiar and some comfortability in case, like you said, break glass in case of emergency type of situation. And my guess is once we get to training camp, we'll see a little bit more of, I think we'll still see a little bit of movement, but not the, like we've seen with Elton at center, Sean Ryan at center, Zach Tom at center, like there's all these guys just moving in all different spots. I think it'll be a lot more defined in it. Right now, it just feels like we're going to move everyone everywhere just to get a feel for it. Maybe for us to kind of see, was there something we didn't know this guy could do? And now we figured something out or unearthed something. But I think it's just moving everyone everywhere at this point.
Yeah, this is like on-field classroom stuff and conditioning, basically. Like you're just kind of trying to feel people out, which again, I'm trying not to make too big of a deal of like Anthony Johnson Jr. is, still starting at safety, and Eric Wilson is getting looks and, the 4-3 defense and all that stuff. So
this is Ben Braden season. I don't know if you remember, but like Ben Braden was getting first team reps at offensive line. I think it was at right guard, and everyone's like, wow, Ben Braden's really stepped up and he's going to get, one of these starting jobs along, and he didn't even make the 53, coming out of camp. So, these are silly times when it comes to roster depth chart stuff, what you see on the field. They're rotating guys in so many different positions. I'm sure they just want to see in a lot of ways, like how different guys react with different people next to them and just kind of get a feel for everyone. So it definitely feels like that's kind of what's going on right now. I want to ask you about an article you wrote a little bit and then kind of pair it with what we saw a little bit in OTAs. You talked about the Packers potentially running more nickel this season, which we know they already ran a bunch of it. And then also yesterday we saw, I think, kind of our first glimpse of, all right, this team could run some real big nickel as well with Javon Bullard potentially in the slot. They ran a lot of 3 safety looks in OTAs. What is your expectation for how this defense could look from a nickel standpoint?
Yeah, I think they're going to do a lot of it. You look at what the Texans do, you look at what the Niners do. They're pretty much like top 6 in the NFL in terms of nickel, right? Keyshawn Nixon was already, the second most played nickel in the NFL as an individual player, but the Packers didn't. They were about league average in terms of how much nickel they ended up playing, and that's also including the penny package stuff. Which, like, yes, it has a nickel on the field, but the front is so different that it's like you have to kind of classify it as its own thing, right? The penny defense is, on the line of scrimmage, you're still playing the 3-4. You just only have one inside linebacker, which is pretty odd and pretty unique to, if not, the Packers last season, like that kind of tree, right? Where it's like, Fangio, Staley, Barry, like there's not that many guys who are running that type of defense. It's more of like a college type of thing, to just kind of jam up inside run, basically. So yeah, I think they can play a whole ton of nickel. The big nickel stuff, like, not surprising. Like, they consider Darnell Savage a nickel. They said that, in the offseason. I don't even know if they like consider it a different package, right? Or if it's just like, yeah, you're playing the nickel spot, you're playing the star, whatever the heck they want to call it. So I'm not too surprised that Bullard is getting a couple looks there. Do you think it's kind of interesting that they're trying to cross a rookie, that early? Oh, did I cut out?
You cut out for a second, but I think we're good. So did you ask if there's, that it's interesting that they're cross-training a rookie? Was that the question?
No, I just think it's interesting that they're cross-training a rookie because, your thought would be, hey, his head is spinning because he's already having to learn, single high defense, right, as a safety. And that's not something that Georgia did a whole ton of, right? They come from quarters family and all that stuff. And now you're asking him to kind of play 2 different positions. And it's like, oh, all right. So he either picks up quick or they're
putting a lot on
already thinking of alternative routes, for, if he doesn't end up playing safety this year. And I just kind of plugged Bullard in as a starter, which maybe I'm wrong for, but he was a, second round pick. So
I'd be pretty surprised if he's not one of the starters. I'm with you on that. Yeah, I'm not super stunned by it, but when you say it out loud, it is sort of, it just does harken to like a guy like Carl Brooks a season ago, who we thought, oh, maybe they could put a little on the edge or in some different spots because he did that a little bit in college, and they just kept him as basically one position. Colby Wooden basically played one position. LVN, even, they didn't do a ton of experimentation with. He was basically an edge guy the entirety of the season last year. So they have been a little bit allergic to doing a lot with the rookies and kind of letting them do one thing to begin with before they start putting too much on their plate. So in that aspect, just kind of, again, thinking of it out loud, yeah, it is interesting that they're already, and it would be another thing if like they let them play safety in OTAs and mini camps, and then come training camp, they're starting to put a little bit more. But the fact that they're putting that on his plate already in OTAs, yeah, it should be, I think, a little telling that at least at minimum, they think that he's capable of handling those responsibilities early in OTAs. And that should, I would think, be a pretty big compliment to Javon Bullard, and Evan Williams, who's done a little bit of it as well.
Yeah. And hey, man, if Bullard is looking good at nickel and he's not starting at safety by week 1, right? To our conversation earlier, where we're like, guys are competing in different rooms and stuff like that. That's terrible news for a cornerback, right? Like, they're probably only going to keep 5 then, because they're going to need so many bodies elsewhere on the roster. So yeah, just interesting stuff to kind of keep tabs on.
This is another question for you. I don't know if any other team does this. I almost wonder if they could do like a Xavier McKinney, like post safety with like 2 safeties almost like in front of them, And if like slot guy is on the left, it's Bullard. And if he goes in motion, Bullard backs up and it goes to like Williams, or like just, I'm just like brainstorming like different unique things that they could do with those two guys if they actually trusted them as box safeties, as post safeties, and as slot guys. Like if you got three guys that are on the field that they trust with all those responsibilities, there's just a lot you could do pre-snap and post-snap for mixing things up and just trying to disguise your defense. I would be intrigued if maybe they do try some stuff with those three guys on the field and just let them go crazy, which could be a lot of fun.
A lot of blitz heavy teams kind of do that because, you know, just from a spacing standpoint, you got to end up rocking and rolling stuff if guys are in motion.
Sure.
I don't expect Halfley to really blitz that much, right? Like you look at what he did at Ohio State when he kind of, I mean, he had more talent than anyone, right? That he ended up playing, right? Like in terms of the guys actually on the field.
Right.
And they've always been, you know, single high, we rush four. You know, we have a Chase Young or a Nick Bosa or a Joey Bosa who's, you know, going to tear your head off, right?
Yep.
So maybe we get a little bit look at that. Some teams do end up doing that a little bit. It is kind of cool seeing a slot back up and basically end up playing a split high safety look and another guy drop down. It's more of a college thing than an NFL thing, unless you know, super high blitz rate teams like you know, Kansas City Chiefs or Baltimore Ravens or something like that.
Yeah. Either way, I'm intrigued, and I think Jeff Hafley's going to have a lot of different weapons on his defense and that at his disposal to do some fun stuff with. All right, I'm going to ask you a question that I put out on Twitter, and I want to know if you have an answer to it. Last year, the Packers wide receivers played about 3,200 snaps total. If you had to take those 3,200 snaps and divide them between the Packers wide receivers, how would you divvy those 3,200 snaps up?
I think we're going to learn a lot about Romeo Doubs this year, right? I think it was Bukowski quote tweeted a stat that, you know, showed that, you know, Doubs is one of the least efficient targets over several years, which, like, you know, from a stats perspective, I get that, right? Like just in terms of like yards or routes ran compared to like yards brought in and stuff like that. But there is talent there, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like we know exactly where Romeo Doubs is right now, which is that he has inconsistent hands. But if you're trying to throw him a ball that is tough to grab, I think he's got the best shot of anyone on the team actually coming down with that thing.
Yep.
Right?
I'd agree.
The question is just like, is he going to take a next step? Because I don't know if that's enough. If, you know, Arrow on Wicks is, you know, still going up. Arrow on Jaden Reed is still going up. Christian Watson is fully healthy again. Like, is that enough to justify him being on the field, you know, for you know, all those snaps? And I know they rotate those guys in through a lot, but like even Bo Melton, right? Arrow's going up. And it's like Romeo Doubs is like kind of still the same guy that we've seen in recent seasons, which is enough to make an NFL roster. But I don't know if you just like continue to invest snaps in that guy. So that's the big one at the wide receiver position that I'm highlighting, because it seems like everyone else is kind of, their trajectory is up.
I'm sure injuries will play some, you know, factor in this through the course of the year. Hopefully not Christian Watson again, but we did see Jaden Reed go down a little bit last year. Dontavian Wicks went down for a little bit last year. Obviously Watson went down, and some of those things kind of worked themselves out. It's amazing that they have the depth with all five of those guys that they do, not to mention a Malik Heath. But yeah, it's interesting. I know a lot of people are more on like Doubs is clearly wide receiver 4, and I'm not sure I disagree, but I also think that
but there's ways that you can use them, right? Like, I know exactly when I want Doubs on the field. I want Doubs on the field when we are going into the end zone, right?
Yep.
And I want Doubs on the field so he can go over the middle on third down.
Yep.
Like, that's where I want, and that's not a problem, but he's been playing a lot more snaps than just that. And he's not contributing on special teams, which, like, I don't think, outside of Malik Heath, I don't think any of these wide receivers are going to be anything other than returners on special teams for Bisaccia. No one really plays wide receiver and special teams, you know, under him. So, like, he's going to make the team. There's no question about that. It's just like, I don't know, man. Like, you're asking me, it's first and 10, we're going to run play action. Do I want him on the field, or do I want Dontavian Wicks, or do I want Jaden Reed in the slot, or do I want Christian Watson running deep? I think he's fourth in the pecking order there.
Yeah.
Maybe behind Melton, because Melton can fly, right?
There were some 3 wide receiver sets at practice the other day with Wicks, Reed, and Melton on the field at the same time that were really, really fun. Like it was just like you could tell like there was a lot of potential there. And I think actually that on the 80-yard touchdown, 75-yard touchdown to Melton, I think those were actually the 3 that were on the field. And you just got a lot of unique weapons when that happens. And that, obviously Christian Watson's another one where if you can put him with any group too, and it's going to be dynamic. I don't envy them having to figure it out, but it's a good problem, but it's a unique problem.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, a couple quick ones, and then we'll get to the kick return rules. Actually, just one quick one. We heard this week that they want to get that Jordan Love contract done before the start of training camp. I'm sure they would like to. Both sides seem motivated to get it done before that time. It makes sense. I don't think you want to go into preseason without that contract done. That could get a little bit messy. Your thoughts? Does this get done pre-training camp? They got some time here to figure this out.
It better.
Yeah.
I mean, what else are we waiting for at this point, right? Everyone had, June 1st circled on the calendar. Hey, we're going to get a little bit of cap space from the, Devondre Campbell, post June 1st designation on his release, all that stuff. Get it done, man. Trevor Lawrence is coming up. Tua is coming up. Dak is coming up, but apparently they've shut down, communication. From what I've heard, Trevor Lawrence is sort of on the same timeline, and it's sort of a situation where it's like, we get this done by camp, or you're hitting me with a franchise tag.
Yeah.
Type of thing. I don't want to live in that situation with Jordan Love.
No.
If Jordan Love goes down week 1, we're still going to need the franchise tag. And then we're going to be in the same spot, and we're going to be like looking at the next season because he's going to have to prove it again and all this. Like, just pay the kid.
Yeah.
He's going to get his money. He's going to get $53 million or whatever. I have no idea how on earth the Packers are going to structure this, because after the Aaron Rodgers deal, I'm like, they'll do anything. So, I'm not even worrying myself how they're going to structure it. I don't think it's going to be like how Goff basically got 3 years guaranteed, right? And then he has a rolling guaranteed for the 4th year. The Packers don't really give guarantees for salary beyond the first year. So, I don't know. Is it going to be a ginormous signing bonus? That means the cap hit immediately is going to be relatively high, but the cap hits aren't going to escalate like crazy, right? It means they're going to be kind of flatter. That's really the only conversation I have, and maybe that's what they're trying to figure out is the cap space and all that. And Kenny Clark has the largest cap hit on the Packers right now, and I think it's almost double what Jair has, and Jair is the next highest guy. So potentially reworking Kenny Clark extension at the same time, so that you could still have a little bit of breathing room, post Clark, post Love, moving forward, so you can resign guys. Maybe that's a thing, but I don't know. Get it done, man. You guys had it all off season.
I think they will. I think this 6 weeks between mini camps and training camp, there's nothing else to do. They'll hammer it out over the course of that time frame, get it done right around or before training camp, and I think everything will be totally fine. I have no concern or panic at this point. I think they'll work it out. I think a lot of the stuff is exactly what you're talking about between guarantees and signing bonuses. How do they want to structure it? Do they want to, just all of those little things? My guess is they're probably I don't know how they kind of couldn't be in the same ballpark for numbers, just based on some of the quarterback contracts we've seen so far and what we kind of all expect.
Yeah, it's you're either just always going to be drafting quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Which dumb, right? It took you what, 3-4 years to develop Jordan Love, 3.5, whatever.
Well, the other thing you could do is you could sign a aging quarterback coming off a torn Achilles to a massive contract and draft somebody in the top 10. That's your other. You could also do that.
Yeah, I mean, again, Love's going to get the $53 million.
Yeah,
and he's rep by Athletes First. Athletes First is the same agency that got all that money out of the Packers for Aaron Rodgers. They know you're willing to go $50 million per year for a guy. They're going to get it. That's fine. That's what everyone is going to have. Tua is going to get that.
Yep.
I'm taking Jordan Love over Tua. I'm not worried about the Jordan Love contract. Just get it done.
Yeah, and I think they will. All right, let's get to your topic of the day, the topic du jour, what everyone wants to talk about. New kick return rules. I will let you take it from here because you're the one that messaged me and are like, we got to talk about kick return rules. You've got some interesting stuff. I know you've talked to a lot of people, so the floor is yours, my friend.
Yeah, so this all started when, did you see what Dave Tobe?
Kansas City?
Yeah, Kansas City Chiefs special teams
Justin Reed?
Yeah, he basically said Justin Reed was going to be the primary kickoff specialist because the kicker is involved, and he said he estimated 25 to 40%, pretty wide gap, of tackles. So I started asking around. I was like, what is going to be the strategy for this? So I talked to some people in the league. I talked to some former XFL people who had a lot of thoughts. Full disclosure, worked with XFL 2020, all that stuff.
Yep.
So we're going to get into your little game theory stuff. You're going to love this.
I love it. I already love it.
The XFL kickoff return average starting position, field position, right, was the 29-yard line. Okay. We had a 30-yard penalty for kicking it out of the back of the end zone. So that disincentivizes that, right?
Yep.
The problem is the NFL moved the field goal or the kickoff position 5 yards, but they kept the same penalty.
Right.
So now we're expecting a return that would be at the 34-yard line versus a kick out the back of the end zone that would have an average starting field position of 30.
Yep.
It's very interesting, right? So
can I stop you there for a second?
Go ahead.
I don't think it's interesting. I think it's stupid. I think they undercut the entire thing. And I think by potentially midway through the season, if not earlier, we're just seeing everyone kick it out of the end zone still. And everything's going to just start at the 30. And the kick return and like what everyone's excited about becomes up. We're just kicking it out of the end zone and the ball is starting at the 30-yard line.
That would suck.
I agree. I totally agree.
Terrible. And I don't know. I don't know if that's because they had to have thought about this. They've talked about this for a year and a half, right? So I don't know if this was the special teams coordinators getting together and being like, hey, guys, we can present this to the NFL and maybe like slip this thing in. And we don't actually have to like have this whole thing figured out this very second. But the special teams coordinators were the people who were pushing this, right? They almost universally were like, yes, thumbs up vote. I can't remember how many teams voted no. The Packers were one.
3.
The Bengals were another. I can't remember who the other one was.
Oh,
The Packers basically said, I think both Mark Murphy and Bisaccia have been on record saying that the reason that they thought, or the reason that they voted no is because they wanted to see a full preseason with it before thinking about if they have to adjust the rules again.
Right.
Which, considering the adjustment on the just the kickoff position, I kind of agree with them.
Yep.
Like, I don't think that's a bad idea. The other thing, so that was one strategy, right? Just kick it out the back of the end zone, same as it ever was. Like, they're going to move it up 5 yards, but kicking out the back of the end zone is going to save you, 4 yards or whatever on average. Like, that's a plus EV play.
And the crazy thing too, just one of the other really quick thing is like before when teams were kicking it out of the end zone and it fell a little bit short, you still had the Keyshawn Nixon moments where they still were like, screw it, I'm going to take it out anyway, because it was at the 25. Now with it being at the 30, like you could end up in a scenario where you're even seeing if they do end up going this route, you even see less returns, because if it's anywhere near the end zone, the coaches are going to go nuts if they take it, 9 yards deep and bring it out, because they're going to get to like the 20 yard, like 23, instead of getting it at the 30. And it's going to be a massive loss here. Before, if Keyshawn took it out and they got to like the 22 instead of the 25,
those guys are still on the 40-yard line. So
exactly. Yeah. It's still not a huge deal. It's just a 3 yard difference. Now, if you get back to the 21, 22, and it should have been at the 30, like they're going to be disincentivized to return those out of the end zone. So if they do come to that conclusion of, we're not letting these guys return, they're getting it past the 30 way too often, we're just kicking it out. And even if it doesn't reach out of the end zone and it gets close, those returners are going to be told, you're just letting it go into the end zone because we want it at the 30.
Yeah. Plus, if you have a weak special teams unit too, right? You just say like, hey, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. We're kicking it out the back of the end zone, and we're going to allocate time and practice a different way. Like that's another angle to take.
Yep.
So that's one strategy, right? Just boot the thing out of the end zone. The other thing that we're going to see, from what I've been told, is basically a long squib. So there's a 30-yard touchback, and then there's also a 20-yard touchback. And what you need to do for the 20-yard touchback is the ball has to land inside the 20. One way we disincentivized this in the XFL was by having a hang time. The ball had to be in the air for 3 seconds. The NFL doesn't have that rule. So if you do see actual kicks, right, you're basically just going to see kickers just drill it into the ground on kind of, a long – it's going to look like a long squib. And that's why one reason why I asked you when you were at practice, and I was, I think it was the first OTAs that was open to the media when they were doing all the kick return stuff. And I was like, do they have one returner back there or two? Because I think you're going to have to play two. If you're playing a team that is, actually going to kick it to you, which, that should be your base formation then, right?
Yep.
You're going to have split back guys because that ball is going to hit the ground fast, and you're not going to be able to cover 53 1/3 sideline to sideline with one guy in the middle of the field, right? So I think you're going to need to have two kick returners back there trying to field the ball if you're going to have any chance to recover.
It did seem like they were practicing a little bit more with an up guy, meaning like a guy that was like 10 yards ahead or like 5 to 10 yards ahead, probably like 10 yards ahead of the kick returner, but not two guys back on two different sides of the field, more of like your kick returner and then a guy 10 yards ahead of him and everyone else up at the line.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I think those are the two. So why'd you need to change it, NFL? I know you guys had to do you had to think of it for a year and be like, we're better than the XFL and all that stuff. And, we definitely didn't just steal this idea, which is fine. If it works, just take it. I know Sam, who works for Amazon Prime now, he does the StatCast thing, if you guys have ever seen that, which, by the way, great. They made huge improvements this past year. Genuinely, I know I'm biased and all that stuff, right? But genuinely, my favorite way to watch football is what they have put out as a product this past year. Huge strides over what they did last year. But he's happy that the NFL kind of took the idea and ran with it. But there's a reason we had some of those rules, not having a hang time, having the touchback be more of a benefit than what the average kickoff return is going to be for the kicking team. That's a pretty big deal, and it's going to impact watchability. If it's just touchbacks, that stinks. At least the squib thing, that might be totally good and dandy and all that stuff. I'll be interested to see what teams even do in the preseason, not even just the early regular season, because I don't think anyone knows what the heck is they want to do.
So walk me through the squib really quick. Is the thinking here because the opposing team can't go until the returner touches the ball, right?
Yes.
So
correct.
Is the idea that they have to bend down and get the ball, which is going to take an extra millisecond to do that?
You're creating a very fast loose ball play.
Gotcha.
Right. So, the whole idea is, you're going to play one returner, in the middle of the field. We're going to try to basically create a ball that you cannot cover before it goes out the back of the end zone.
Gotcha. So wouldn't you in that situation, let's say you squib it long and it just goes down to the 5-yard line or whatever, right? And it's spinning there at the 5-yard line or whatever. Wouldn't you kind of get behind it, get ready to pick it up, but don't touch it until you're 1,000,000% ready to go? Just give it everything you need.
But that's the thing. It's the squib is going to be it landing at the 10 with no arc, just line drive at the 10-yard line, and then just bouncing, and then it goes out the back of the end zone. That's what kicking teams are hoping for. And
then if it does that, you get it at the 20.
The 20.
Got it. Okay. So yeah, that makes sense then. That's 1,000,000% what they're going to try to do. Would be that they'll try to squib it out of the end zone. And I agree with you. They're going to have to do two guys back, I think, if you're going to start doing that, because otherwise you're probably just going to have it go through the end zone and get it at the 20. But that would also, I would think then that, from the Dave Tube thing with, Justin Reed, I guess, I mean, he's a talented dude when it comes even to kicking, but I would think that you would want to, get your Justin Tuckers, your Harrison Butkers that could line drive that thing where it's going to take some crazy bounces and bound out of the end zone and put a little bit more muscle behind that and have it so that it's not returned and that they do get it at the 20.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Tube even himself said, like, it's all about accuracy now.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes me think maybe the Chiefs are going to like try to like coffin corner this stuff.
Yeah.
Again, these are the two prevailing strategies that I had heard. But we're going to see a lot of weird stuff early on. That's why, again, I'm pretty excited for the fact that, the Packers are having joint practices with the Ravens, right? Like, you're getting Harbaugh versus Bisaccia, in the preseason. Like, figure it out. Yeah, like throw weird shit at the wall, right?
Yeah.
And try to kind of like figure this whole thing out. So I could see just not even like the rules potentially changing mid-season because there's a bunch of touchbacks. I could see strategies changing on like a week-to-week basis where like teams try to figure out the meta. Like, you can do end rounds on these.
Yeah.
Like, that's something that happened in the XFL. Like, teams didn't figure that out until like week 4 or something like that in 2020. Like, that's going to be an odd thing to have to deal with. There's just so much up in the air right now.
I'm excited for it. My hope, like, that's why I was upset with the 30-yard line instead of the 35, because it was originally set to be the 35-yard line, correct? And then they changed it at the last minute to the 30. Because to me, if it was the 35, you're getting returns every time. I don't think any, outside of having a Devin Hester-esque kick returner that's bringing it out past the 50 every single time, basically, and you're not risking it.
If you have split kick returners, you can kick away from one of them.
Exactly.
Right. So you can try to, kick to the quote unquote weaker one. Right. So that's going to be something that is probably going to be implemented too. So, yeah, I mean, there's just like, if you would have just kept the rules the same.
Yeah.
It probably would have been a better product. And we'll have to see how it ends up playing out. Maybe NFL coaches come up with different strategies than the XFL guys did. But it wasn't just 2020, right? Like, XFL used it, in the other seasons too, when they came back under a different administration. We painstakingly went through, like, we used junior colleges to kind of like test this stuff out, in the years leading up to XFL 2020 and all that. And that kind of ended up being the meta. So we'll have to see if there's any sort of difference.
It'll be interesting. Like I said, I wish they just would have kept it at the 35. I'm hopeful that it doesn't just devolve into everyone kicking it out of bounds and everyone just taking it at the 30. That would certainly be a major disappointment. And to an extent, I almost wish they would have done the preseason. Like, I know there's not like that time to get together in between, like, and change a rule in between preseason and regular season. But I think my ultimate answer is I just wish they would have kept it the exact same way the XFL had it. I don't think they made any improvements upon it.
I don't think so either. And yeah, I mean, that's just my opinion, but I don't think they made any significant changes in a positive way. So we'll have to see how this ends up working out. I don't know what these special teams coordinators did for the full year that they said that they were talking about the rule. Seems like all they did was incentivize more touchbacks, which opposite of what we wanted, guys. Thumbs down. No, we did not want this.
No, totally agreed. All right, last but not least, have to ask you the most important question that I will ask you today.
Stafford would have won 5.
I can't get into that. I can't get into the Stafford Eli Manning thing. Even more important than that, NCAA football coming out again. Who is the first team that you are building a dynasty with?
All right. There's 2 paths I can potentially take, right?
All right.
And I'm trying to figure this out right now because I think I got like 18 buddies who are, we're all going to do a dynasty on PS5 and stuff like that. I've told my girlfriend, I'm counting down the days and I'm taking PTO for this. Like, first time I've taken PTO in like 3 years working for Blocks. So 1, just smother people with working, right? Just rich asshole, guns blazing, poo, 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 Nike money. I'm taking your guys. The other option, 1-star New Mexico University Bad Hombres and just building that thing up from like El Paso. So it's either a custom team that's just like starting at ground zero, or it's Oregon. That's it for me.
I was this was back, I don't know, too far ago that I don't even want to say the year that I played it. I was a big Hawaii guy, always taking Hawaii, bringing them to the national championship, making them a big contender, making teams have to come all the way out to Hawaii. So I think I'll continue the tradition. If I pick up the game, I'm not sure. I don't have a ton of time to play anymore, especially with the 2 kids and all the soccer and stuff. But if I get some time to play it, I think I might have to bring back the Hawaii dynasty.
I'm making time. I'm forcing time. And there's no chance you'll find me on Madden this year.
No. Yeah. I've retired from Madden for the most part. I was too good at one point to now be totally sucky at it and not even be able to beat my kids probably. So it's too humbling and I can't do it anymore. So yeah, I'll have to make some business decisions and what I want to play if I do play something. But overall, I'm excited for it. I know people are, losing their crap over it, rightfully so. It's been freaking forever. I just hope the gameplay is good. Have you had the opportunity to play it? Did you get a demo?
I have not. I have DM'd several people from EA Sports shamelessly and been like, just eyeball emojis. Like, if you need someone to test this game, I'll tell you the truth about it. And every response is like, yeah, if you want to like pay your way to Orlando. Oh my God. I don't want to play it that bad. So
yeah, just give me a code, damn it, or something.
Yeah. So I'm waiting the same way everyone else is. So
all right, well, enjoy it when it comes out. I know everyone's really looking forward to it. I just hope the gameplay is amazing. And what, all this time off they've had, I don't know 15 years. When was the last one? 2000. Yeah.
14. So that would have been the 13th season.
Yeah. So basically a decade. So hopefully they've developed a game that is worthy of the name, and hopefully everyone's AA gap blitzes work like they used to a long time ago. Justis, you are absolutely amazing. Tell everyone about Acme Packing Company and where they can find you on socials.
Yeah, man, we're getting the practice recaps up. We did a positional preview where we went through every single position, every single player on the Packers roster, and kind of like talked about, their standing on the team. What are we looking for this summer? Like, are they a roster bubble guy? Or are they like a practice squad bubble guy? Are they fighting for playing time? That type of thing. Some UFL stuff has popped up. Do you know our own Danny Etling is
I thought Manny Wilkins was a guy that was starting out there.
So Manny Wilkins was starting, but AJ McCarron came back off of injury.
Gotcha.
So he's starting in the XFL championship game. Danny Etling is starting in the UFL championship game. And I think like 3 former Packers were named all UFL this past day. It was like Chris Odom, Carlos, I forget what Carlos, I can't remember. And then Jay Sternberger again.
Yeah, I saw Sternberger and I saw Odom. Didn't they have the Zach Johnson kid at guard for a hot second too? Or is that the North Dakota State kid, or am I confusing people?
I think so. I haven't Googled it. I bookmarked the all UFL team, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that guy was a Packer too. But
I think he was a Packer for a hot. I think that's the North Dakota State guy. I could be totally mistaken, or it could be a different Zach Johnson or whatever.
Speaking of former UFL Packers, do you know who the only kicker on the Commanders is right now?
Ramiz Ahmed.
Yeah. What a come up. That guy was cut a week ago from the UFL, and now he's the only kicker in Commanders camp.
You thought the Packers had it bad at kicker right now.
That's what I'm like, dude, whichever guy we cut, he's basically going to be a Commander at this point.
Probably.
We talked about this a couple of years ago when we were talking about just the kicking market in general, and all these guys aging out or severely declining, and young guys not stepping up back into their play. Like, the NFL is in a bad spot for kickers. Like, the Patriots drafted Ryland before Daniel Carlson or Anders Carlson. Sorry, he's worse than Carlson, statistically.
Yeah,
and we're bitching and moaning and stuff about Carlson. Like, there's worse out there.
Very much so.
And it could get very bad for the Commanders if they're not paying attention and being very diligent about their kicking situation.
Is this Bates kid going to get an opportunity in the NFL, you think? Is that the kid who was hitting 63 yarders or whatever?
He's got it. He's got it. I mean, he's drilling 60-yarders consistently. Plus, after what the Cowboys did, with the guy that they brought in from spring league, who was like the soccer player at Notre Dame and all that stuff. Like, I think that's just going to be a real path for those guys.
Saints got an international pathway program kicker too, like Charlie Smith or something.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know about him. I knew about the 2 linemen. Well, one of them got drafted, not the one that I expected to get drafted. And then I knew about the kid who ended up signing with the Chiefs, but those were the only international guys I know.
Yeah, Charlie Smith is the name. He's a kicker for New Orleans on the international pathway program. He was, I think, a soccer player, I want to say. Oh, no, a Gaelic football goalkeeper. So yeah, soccer player. But yeah, he was a goalkeeper.
That's interesting.
He is 6'4", 22 years old, out of the UK, United Kingdom.
Get him punting. The
what's
punters
that?
Get him punting. The punting,
yeah, right.
The punters are the long ones.
Yeah, you would think, but I don't know. We'll see. He's got an opportunity with the Saints. We'll see if he makes anything of it, like the Dallas guy last year. All right, Justis, we could probably go on a million different other tangents. I'll get you out of here. Follow him at JUMOSQ. You can find me at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. Go check out Acme Packing Company. By the way, every single day, usually before the podcast, I always check Acme Packing Company just to make sure, like, did I forget anything that happened during the day today? Because you guys are always so diligent at updating even the most minute of amazing things, which is, of course, my cup of tea.
Hey,
I want to cover everything.
It's June.
It is June.
That's what we got.
I'm giving it as a compliment. I'm giving it fully as a compliment. So I'm checking Acme Packing every day right before I record my episode, just to be like, is there anything else I forgot that happened today? Because I know if there was, Acme Packing Company has it. So go check them out. We will see you guys next time. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.